Book 3, The Way Forward, Part 1, Chapter 1. Camino means way in Spanish. In this book, I shall start by telling you a little about my way in life, from the day I was born until now. The book will end with a couple of prospectuses. They are examples and show how I today use the entire knowledge you are reading about in all 4 books in practical terms in my professional life. How everything is communicated just to inspire you. Maybe I can inspire you to use some methodologies, principles, etc. in your own job, your company, or your private life. Or maybe you will want to learn more and develop yourself within the way you are on. At the very end, you can read and see how I have used my entire knowledge as my signature in Ancient Academy. I've also asked my husband for some of his stories, experiences, thoughtful statements, and the major incidents in his life, either as a short description or as part of a blog. They are included as they represent the male version and perspective, so that we briefly get this angle into the book. The angle which represents the consciousness of the feminine and masculine intelligence in the form of our relation and experiences together and separately, as examples in our lives. Therefore, there'll be various short descriptions from him in this book, representing the other side of the coin in the male version. Old Persia, Tehran, 1976. Who am I? I've had a very dynamic and busy life from the day I was born. I've always stood strong for who I am in my heart, even as a little girl in Old Persia. But when I had to do the same with my intellect, I have not always been able to keep the balance. I have always overwhelmed everybody around me, including my own mother. This is where I had the greatest of my learnings and experiences. It wasn't because I was not smart or strong enough, but my intellect was influenced by my surroundings, society's norms, family culture, other people's expectations or perceptions, thought forms, or society's bourgeois approach to life. And all of this has always challenged me to the wild development I have had. I was different from childhood. For better or worse, I don't know. I think I was fantastic when I look back or check how I felt inside at that time. Nothing and nobody could overthrow my inner universe. With the passage of time and various influences, which also shaped me in the progress, I had many different sides developed and integrated into me, which we all do while developing through life. My self-doubt and trust in others was my weak point, but also my strength. It is the doubt and curiosity, where I toss and turn everything and do not take everything for granted, and find the understanding and a form to perceive and feel everything. It's also where I can get too much in my brain if I don't remember to check in the progress. Therefore, I've been able to invent an algorithm, work out a theory, make the hypotheses, and in general do everything I do. My doubt and curiosity helped me create something which fulfills a great need for many people. How can we learn to understand the emotions more concretely in order to feel them and use them in a total compass together with our instincts, where they are not just described and transformed into concrete tools we can use in our everyday life in the midst of our busyness, tools which activate and train us to understand our emotional intelligence and to make use of it in a wholeness, in an interaction with our concrete part of our brain, our logical thinking, where we can activate more of our abilities which have so far been very difficult to explain or use as an understandable world. It's easy to explain what my intuition tells, but as we humans are built, it requires an explanation and a justification to be able to accept the intuition, which may be based on instincts or ego, or simply because it is actually possible to decode the condition of emotional energy. You do not trust which way I feel you should go, but I know, or I can show you on a map. Anyway, we need a common language of the emotional world and a bridge to the operational world, our instinctively and logically thinking world. This I have used myself, my abilities and my life to realize. I feel and use my dynamic intuition, and with my organic instincts I am able to format, convert, and transform what cannot be seen or understood, but be felt into something intellectual which can be understood, seen, and used, and vice versa. I have almost unconditional faith in other people and thus situations. There I have my ability to act, and impulsiveness with my EQ and IQ. It is where I am still a playful child as an adult, enjoying myself and enjoying the life that I have created and still interact in. However, it is also there I have been able to be fully overthrown if I trusted the wrong people or situations, as I didn't have the concept of dualities in focus. Many people have called me naive, but they couldn't be more wrong. A conscious choice of being present with full confidence until proven otherwise is to me not to be naive. Today, I trust that I can handle the consequences if the trust ceases and the doubt turns out to be valid in the given situation. I would not want to be without my confidence in life and in others, and would rather take those bumps appearing on the way sometimes. But the peace and the power the confidence gives me is indescribable. It is in the confidence the love we all seek can be found, to us, to our partner, and the world around us. But doubt is the grounding for me, which makes me think twice to assess and reassess my confidence before I move. My self-doubt is my humbleness, where I also get curious and find the belief when I find the solutions. This is my way to see and navigate with these two. I do not believe that I can allow myself to doubt others, as then I would judge others for being something which is not good without first knowing it. And furthermore, I would then also doubt myself. So it is for sure that they would end up doing what I already assume, feel mistrust, even if this was not their intention. To me, in my world, I believe that I cannot walk around judging everything for being something I do not know of before I know it. Until the person or the situation has turned out to be the one which or who is not worthy of trust, and this would be applying only in the time warp where we meet it, that is, in the present tense. Where I have always made my biggest blunders is where I actually knew that the person or the situation was not good, and yet would not recognize the condition of the present person or the situation, and have chosen to go into it with confidence anyway, meaning that I did not trust my dynamic intuition. Yes, I know this doesn't make sense, but I did tell you that I had to learn a thing or two about how I should connect my intellect to my emotional navigation center with more balance between my organic instinct and dynamic intuition, my doubt and my belief. You are going to read much more about this, which will show through the story of my life. To have access to the two elementary keystones inside us is a gift for our consciousness. At least it is for me, as this part forces me to balance in the world of emotions and intellect as an emotional person. Again, this is the dualities from their best side, even on the physical and energetic genetic basis, which we have as human beings. We can find a cause and effect, opposite poles that create balance. I shall currently be telling a little about my life in this book. It may include you as my ex-husband, my father, in-laws or ex-wives, you who have touched my life at some point. My intention is not to expose anyone, and therefore I shall not describe my life story in detail. It is my story and I own it, but I will cherish your identity. As I am married for the second time and have some long-term relationships behind me, it could be any one of the exes, fathers-in-law or mothers-in-law, which I've had and mentioned. I cannot always write the whole story if, for instance, it is going to have a negative effect for the person involved. As far as possible, I try to tell an overall story, which is my truth. Therefore, my life story will this time not be that long and detailed. The purpose of the stories is to prove that everybody can recover again, regardless of the unhealthy condition of the relation and the relationship. It is not about the humans, but about the concept they represent, and which many people can relate to. It could be an ex-wife. And that is to present the concept itself. It is not about you being my husband's ex, but about the concept and the story which is being told for inspiration, food for thought. I keep a sharp distance from politics and debates about religions, even though I philosophize about the thoughts behind them, or come up with other possible thought forms which may be a future solution. Again, there is no right or wrong to me, only the line in between and the meaning behind it. I cannot remember much from my childhood, or in general from my past. There is always so much going on in my life. I was born in the old Persia, in Tehran, and I come from a family built on double bonds. This means a father who was not a believer and very science-oriented, and a mother who believes in all religions. Everything, we suppose, can be found between heaven and earth. Because my father is from an old-fashioned thought form, then we believed in the world of science back then. He was a dentist and enjoyed himself in that world. My mother was a dental assistant, and they found each other themselves, fell in love, and decided, despite the family's objection, that they wanted to get married. That is a rather cool thing to think of, that they have had that opportunity almost 55 years ago in Persia. I do remember that my old grandmother drove a car at that time, and it's also crazy to think back on this today, when I look at the condition of thought forms of foreigners from all corners of the world, in Denmark, so far from the world I come from, as regards men's view of women and women's rights being present in Persia in those days, at least in my family. I've experienced a little bit of everything, both human and various forms of the known world crises. I will never forget the day my children came into the world and made me the happiest woman in the universe, as they toppled my world upside down. I shall never forget the day my first business was founded, and I acquired the title of entrepreneur, absolutely my passion in life. Or the day I was employed as a CEO and was able to test the theory and the tools in practice. I clearly remember how I realized what the difference between a leader from the Harvard University and a true natural leader was. And this is something that no one can teach you, but which you have inside you. Also, absolutely one of the passions in my life. Finally, I'm going to finish with the experience of my second marriage. Do you know that thing about meeting your soulmate? A love which is indescribable and boundless? I found my best friend and my present husband, who once again toppled my world upside down. Our different worlds, where we come from, became my diploma of what the school of life had taught me. It was as if I was faced with a PhD task. I got the man and my best friend, and with that came all the trials. The task description was to use your whole knowledge and experience and tell if you can keep the balance. Can you keep the freedom over the new norms coming from him? Can you remain the whole you exactly as you are, despite the resistance, the rejection, or even condemnations, which might come with conflicts around you? Or would you doubt it? Does real and unconditional love exist between a man and a woman when everything comes crashing down? What is the glue? What will survive, and what is the reason for it? how are you going to handle it when others don't understand what you are coming with, and which is so new and innovative? The task of this PhD was long, big, and comprehensive. But as everything else in my life, I managed it. I turned everything in my favor, learning and success experience, and had it not been for the task he brought along, then I would probably not be standing here today with the book. That PhD-level task showed me how strong, loving, and proper I am as a person. The realization I needed in order to neutralize my doubt so that I could finish my book. I learned self-love on a high level, and to follow my present husband's development showed me how I reformatted my entire life into wisdom. So, with this ending, I'm going to tell briefly about my life in the coming pages. Double cultural and 10 times richer. I am one of the Danish Persians who can proudly tell only positive and good stories about my move, integration, or change process this has always entailed. So let's just state that it can be done, also for a woman. I know there are many of my kind out there. There are many who say that men have the hardest time, but we must remember that we create our own storytelling, which others listen to and believe in, and at the end it becomes a reality, our reality, which can always be changed, as the basis of life is dynamically changing processes. And yes, now I'm moving into a topic that can get many people's blood boiling. But let's remember that we must not judge others. Then we would judge ourselves, as we are tied to each other, and as everything has its opposite pole. This is the basic principle in the book and everything I represent. Either men are the victims in one culture, or women in other cultures, or all cultures. Time out. And please remember that nobody forces you to read what I'm writing here, or to participate when I'm debating. You have the choice to walk away and turn your back on me and to not interact. Is it not fantastic to have this freedom, whether you are a man or a woman? Imagine being in a place where you have the freedom to choose, to be able to walk away from something you disagree with, to choose a truth which suits you, a faith you can hold on to without compulsion and without a dictatorial thought form telling you that you have one choice only. A belief, a tradition, a way of doing things, your family characterized by their life story and by the social system they come from, their time warp, the single-minded thought form they can present to you, and which cannot be developed. They are not updated in step with our development as a human, in step with technology and social changes, or with the time which has been since your faith was founded. Imagine that you can build your life exactly as you wish, with a freedom not many others have worldwide. So why try to be the person who imposes your beliefs or thought form on others? Why not respect other people's faith and thought form? Why do you think that you are right, or that your faith is the alpha faith in the market? Is that not what your faith tells you not to do? Not to judge and to highlight yourself as the know-it-all ego? All religions in common refer to diversity, acceptance, love, and not judging. And yet they have their double bonds that can be interpreted and abused, as if communication is an easy thing for us already. Who knows what is lost in the communication assumption of various religions when they were translated or rewritten, passed from one time warp to another? How do you think I would convert, translate, and interpret the Quran or Christianity with my perception ability compared to a priest or an imam? And imagine how our ancestors, with their consciousness, have translated, converted, and interpreted the writings from one age to the other during the world history we know today. War after war, power struggle after power struggle, the words change their meaning with time, culture, and our human understanding development. When religion creates discord, like some are better than others or something is better than anything else, then it is to me the human behind who interprets and not the message. Translations are dependent on the person who translates and interprets the message. This is human's consciousness. The message can be interpreted in many ways depending on the observer's or the translator's ability to understand and convey. And this is tied to which family, faith, thought form and social culture this person comes from. Totalism does not belong to our age anymore. So let's be clear, whether or not it is the free will, when we are that unit who has moved from one country to another, collective consciousness, then we are the ones choosing to be where we are in the country we live in. We are the ones having the responsibility for our challenges tied to the thought form, faith and traditions we come from and with. For interpretations, beliefs, faith or cultural understandings of anything, and especially about gender roles. Some countries are better to move to than others, and thus it is first of all our responsibility to make the integration and to meet with the opposite poles, depending on who we are, where we are in our development, what do we believe in, are we prepared to change, do we wish to be happy human beings? Some cultures are better to be part of than others. Better? No, I suppose we mean that it suits us better, and also our traditions and faith. We quite forget that we bring our unit with the whole system inside us into a new system, and that we must make these two fit together, to be integrated. Sometimes it's just like taking an Apple product and trying to integrate it with the Microsoft product, or to try handling an Apple in the same way as we handle Microsoft. So we must all soon become a little more realistic. And no, I do not touch on human rights and the humanitarian elements in this right now. That's a completely different talk, which is often misunderstood and mixed into the integration discussion. I'm just philosophizing on this subject briefly, and I'm trying to create understanding and lift up a subject where we can debate it on a higher level than we are doing now, as no one dares say anything. A subject which creates the largest challenges the world is facing, the balance between faith and doubt, women's and men's rights, spirituality and science, our integration abilities and understanding abilities. Wonder if it is about time that women and men moving to other countries with the opposite faith come to terms with the fact that they actually move to another country with another culture and worldview, or that the systems which accept the integration actually understand the content of the task, what should be integrated, and whether it is compatible. What does it require? The answer cannot be a Danish language exam for women. It is no use that we all constantly try to keep the different worlds we come from, where we were raised or only know, without being willing to develop our beliefs and understanding, being ready for change. Suppose we forget that we are the ones seeking a new collective consciousness. The collective consciousness also has a very special task in that process. It can make use of the useful knowledge which those units are coming with, and which it is supposed to integrate. Integration is a reciprocal process, to agree to disagree. I shall stop here, as this topic is a book in itself. So, yes, part of the theory and the tools in this book are about the concept, integration, and change processes as a leader, entrepreneur, or simply political. But let's get back to my storytelling. I had been my daddy's little girl, and he has always taught me and told me that I had to be independent, make my own money, and never depend on men. He also tried to warn me against the world of the emotions, as he thought they would knock me over. He himself is a very emotional person. If only he knew then what I'm working on today. I came to Denmark as a 15-year-old after having been separated from my father for 2 years. It is probably the greatest miss of my life. My mother is a very quiet woman, and most of that time we did not talk. And still, she's also a very loving woman to her fellow human beings and loves her siblings. They stick together across countries internationally. Her greatest desire was to have a boy who climbed up the walls, and my father's dream was to have a girl. So you have to say that they got their wishes fulfilled when my mother had my little brother when I was 4. My parents' differences and strengths caused a very turbulent and wild life that no one else in the family has been able to understand or handle, not even themselves. Because they chose each other and went up against the norms, they were very lonely in their journey in life. The catalyst of their divorce was the identity crisis they got into after having moved to Denmark, as man, as woman, and their defined roles. I have been very much alone after I came to Denmark, as my family's divorce separated and phased out everything. I chose to walk away before they got divorced, and they backed me up. I love my family, and they have given me my freedom to select and deselect and to live a life that was mine. They've never owned me or tried to own my life. It's probably the greatest gift of my life they have given me. Although we hardly see each other, I know that if I need help, they will be there without conditions. For as long as I can remember, I've always been the one everyone always sought out as a child. If my mother had to cut a piece of fabric to sew a dress, everyone had to sit down so that it did not bring misfortune. But I was allowed to stand or walk, for I brought happiness. When the men were drinking whiskey and playing backgammon and were losing, they always called me to sit on their lap, because I brought luck. If I had not had the father I have, with all the good advice and freedom he has given me as the masculine role model in my life, I would never have been able to do what I do today, and I would never have been able to help others like this. So I got the perfect parents for the right learning for me in the life I have and am moving through. They have imprinted on me with the energy I needed. What my father gave me were tools to deal with my mother, and what my mother gave me were tools to deal with my father. A beautiful way to learn to balance in the feminine and masculine world, where I learned a lot about myself as a person, independence and detachment from old patterns, finding new ways to do everything, breaking family patterns on all fronts. It's an era shift in the family timeline. I completed what they started by choosing on their way to go after love and dare to bet on each other. That they then unfortunately did not have tools or programs to navigate the new way they chose was something else. I made sure to have that. I found my way with a new program, new tools, and a new way of thinking. Thoughts opened the way for me to stand here. It was a great price to pay, even if it was unconscious. I learned about femininity and masculinity from the true teachers, of the opposite gender and my own gender, from my parents, but also from my process in the double cultural process of life. I learned to see and feel the cause and effect of using or abusing the two inner powers of the opposite gender, who were my parents. More beautiful it could not be. Whether it was tough, I cannot remember. That is what people around me are saying. I have never cared about being stuck in a bad feeling or failures or mistakes. My instinctive and intuitive reaction has always been recognize what is, move on to where the solution is, and figure out how we can turn a negative situation into a positive one. turn everything into successes. I remember myself as a 4-year-old sitting near a wood stove. My little brother had just been born. The riots in Persia at that time were noisy from time to time. I remember looking out the window, and on the other side of the road there was a bank. There was shooting, some dead. All I thought was, why is it that they do not find a solution? Can't be so difficult. I felt like going down and saying, stop, break, think twice. What else can he do better than rob a bank and shoot people? Maybe just rob the bank and not kill other people. So, with the passage of time and after I came to Denmark, I closed down more and more my originality, my special innate abilities, my combined intelligence, where emotions and intellect went hand in hand with me as the little Persian girl in my own little fairy tale world of chemistry, physics, design, then psychology and philosophy. Everything came together. For even here in Denmark, it was not so common with this kind of combined way of thinking and being back then. Just to become accepted and defined, first as a stranger and then as an immigrant, and then Danish, was a task big enough. One identity at a time, I would say. I put my whole self on the shelf, and half-consciously I started a life where I missed the balance I had as a little girl. One thing I carried with me from my childhood, and which became the lesson of my life, was that I would rather not be more skilled than others, because then they felt bad about themselves. So I quickly found a survival strategy called I turn down my 1,000-watt bulb so others don't get dazzled. My curly brain and where I was highly intelligent were put to sleep. This led me to accept traumatic life circumstances I experienced in subsequent adult years, which I would no doubt have avoided had I had the whole of me and my navigation system with me. My integration in Denmark also required once again that I had to give up a large part of who I was, what I had learned and could do, in order to slip through the integration as I did then. So there was both a positive and a negative part in the mechanism. But not having all my intelligence with me and getting permission to show it off got me into the outer edges of life that not many of us want voluntarily. We should preferably not be at the outer edges, but right in the middle of the balance point, when we interact with each other. I was missing my compass I knew I once had. After all, I did not show my whole self to the collective consciousness in order to carry out the necessary integration, and only used my integration abilities, so I had to turn down my volume, my truths, and what I could actually do in my wholenesses. We as human beings constantly define everything as right or wrong. This compromise on my part was seen as someone who was not so strong in the depths, who was not competent enough, someone who was not very capable. Imagine that when everyone else was striving to become something and working hard to get high marks and to be better, I made myself half stupid in order to be part of the collective and social consciousness. What a mess. It's just so hard to come back and be who you are when everyone who knows you keeps you in the role they know you from outside. But it is good that we are getting older and that everything is constantly moving and changing. Then, again and again, we get opportunities and solutions for a new start and development. When it was necessary, because I was on the fringes of life and I had to find solutions to break through with full force, everyone was lying down and no one could keep up. When you are a force of nature, then you are born in your own stew. This was a statement my business coach gave me when I started my journey as an entrepreneur. He said, "You have no idea what you have inside you and what you can do. What you automatically have as a natural part of you, we others struggle to get. You were not born in the same stew as the rest of us. You have a very special pot which you were cooked in." This was the awakening of my life, as someone from the collective consciousness had captured me, saw me, and gave me another of the greatest gifts I have received from others in my life. I didn't quite understand what he was saying, and sometimes today I still do not quite understand it, but I can feel it. I try to remember how it feels and to transform it into a more useful element in my everyday life. It is not that you are better than me or that I am better than you, but that you are skilled at one thing, your thing, and I am good at one thing, my thing. The wise words that opened up a truth that I had put on a shelf and thus would not look at. All my inner power. I was afraid of my whole self because it overwhelmed others and they got scared. No one had taught me how to deal with them or me and the abilities I possessed. Some things I shut down because I was not allowed to be more skilled than my little brother, and the rest because I had to integrate after my move from Persia to Denmark. Too much of anything is not good, and too little also creates imbalance. The learning started there, to balance with the great inner force. But we have to go back to 1992 to get the wholeness in. The fact is that I never showed people my full inborn potential, but overruled it for the sake of the wholeness. Well, when I write about it, I get completely out of breath about what exactly this pattern has cost me in subsequent years. Isilgal as the first stop. After 2 years, when I had to do without my father in Tehran, our residence permit in Denmark finally arrived. The only thing I remember from my arrival in Kastrup is the taxi ride to where we were staying. We had gotten an apartment in the middle of Isilgal, which back then was something completely different from today. I vividly remember the huge breasts sticking out of a window under some red flashing lights, the mega big breasts that just hung out the window and had some long embellishments on, also in red, long papillotes that moved with every movement she made in the few seconds we drove by. She was a very big woman, and I remember that I wondered how she could press herself through the window, sitting there with her arms under her huge breasts. Well, welcome to Denmark. I cannot remember any judgmental thoughts about her, or about whatever I saw driving through Isilgal. It was only what it was. Maybe it felt like I had been here before, and now I was here again. I don't know. But it was all just natural, and it was what it was. The next thing I remember was the very worn apartments and the stairwell. The apartments stank of assorted smells I was not familiar with or used to. Well, there were probably 20 different food culture scents that together created a chaotic scent. I have no doubt that each fragrance individually told a completely different story. My parents moved to a terraced house pretty quickly, and we got into a very normal state pretty quickly. At least I did. It's not my feeling they ever did. That's another story, not my story to tell, as I wasn't a part of it either. I just experienced it and saw the consequences from a distance in the following years. No divorce is a party. Theirs was not either, as they are still, even today, stuck in the same time warp and talk about those days as if they were still in the 90s. Incredible what a shock can do to people. My parents put me straight into 9th grade at a Catholic private school. The ordinary school in Estelgel was obviously not the solution for them, and they refused to let me go to a language school together with other foreigners. They had an idea that I should learn the language and culture in a different way. Even though they really, in particular my father, had a hard time at times with the cultural shift, I've always been given my freedom to choose for myself. However, I also experienced other sides of him or them which would be non-existent where they came from. So the cultural and collective consciousness created some behavior patterns inside them which I had never seen come later on. Both good and less good. And here the integration hypothesis and the ability to integrate with others and systems come into play. Integration and its abilities. Here we are talking about different nationalities and cultures on an international level. However, it may as well be in a business or a family integration, when our children become adults, choose their way, profession or partner, who or which are not compatible with us and our systems. Employees who never fit in or find it difficult to fit into the system the company has. Integration and integration abilities are some of the most important elements of combined consciousness and our general development as a unit or consciousness in a collective consciousness or systems. Not to judge things of being right or wrong is the essence of the fact that integration can start. A transformation phase as the keystone. To be able to activate our integration ability, we absolutely have to be capable of comprehending wholenesses with their differences. So, both parties, opposite poles, here we must use our capacity abilities. As we read about in the chapter with the topic on criticism, it's not just about accepting or rejecting. If we cannot be or stand up for who we are as a unit or collectively. It's about estimations and curiosity to understand, learn and develop ourselves, and thus to estimate again how we can meet in an agreement with the disagreement. Is it possible? Not all thought forms can thrive or survive in other people's circumstances. Other people's thought forms and the energy which gives life and a circulating life cycle. If they judge each other to be wrong, then they are likely to stop the process being in between, and everything becomes static and turns into a blockage which cannot balance in its duality. When the dualities cease, conflicts are created. Conflicts can be used for development or phasing out, which are again stabilized in a new duality. Here, we are talking about innovation ability. To find a new way or method or thought form as the solution to an existing challenge, disagreement or system error, which has not been found or created earlier. To be capable of seeing possibilities, being curious and finding solutions, which nobody or not many others have seen, come up with, developed or are in front of. That is our innovation ability. We use this being an entrepreneur, a leader, or in the kindergarten in the game, or simply when we are creative. To be able to integrate ourselves with the opposite poles or just the differences in the process, the first step is not to judge it, which we do not understand to be right or wrong. Otherwise, we shall reject and meet resistance. We must remember our thought forms, saying appropriate or not appropriate to my system or my collective system, my consciousness, which it must interact and integrate itself in and with. In the change processes, integration is one of the basic elements for implementation of a change process. An integration can be implemented only when there is agreement between the two poles to meet in the middle, in the 0 point, the loop of time. Here, we must be aware of one thing. Being a unit, we cannot leave our collective consciousness or system, which we do not want anymore, and arrive at a new system of collective consciousness, and then expect that the patterns of the system we brought with us can be practiced in the new system. There, we get to work overtime with our own unit system, patterns and beliefs about the faith and patterns of behavior which we know. Here, we need our integration ability, coincidence ability, innovation ability, divergent ability, wholeness ability, and capacity ability to be able to understand the mechanical and emotional condition of the entire system and to comprehend it, to perceive it. We must use our innovation ability to find new ways of developing ourselves so that we can act, think, and be part of a new system. We need to understand the concept of coincidence ability and to use it correctly, as the units in this system and its entire collective consciousness are going to create a lot of situations for us, which we are not familiar with and do not want. After all, we are not used to them, do not understand them, do not believe in them, or simply have the opposite belief and thought form which this random situation brings. Just imagine a Dane living in Persia and trying to stick to their beliefs and their actions as if they were still in Denmark. What do you think would happen between this unit and the collective unit in Persia? A drunken Dane on a Saturday night in Persia would certainly create a coincidence that the system does not want or anticipates. Or if the Iranian regime would then execute the Dane because he had expressed his opinion of Islam in public, this would at least create a coincidence for the Dane, which was not exactly included in his thought form where he comes from. When both opposite poles reject, then the conflict occurs. The peace is replaced by chaos, and errors occur in the system, and a unit which is not then thriving. All of this because the thought forms being outdated and needing an update in the new process. Or the opposite situation. This would probably be all the integration problems we have in Denmark. I'll just quickly slip on from here. My integration. I was enrolled directly in a Catholic private school right away. It must have been early 1992, so I got a few months at the school. Without a word of Danish, I did great in math, chemistry, and physics, but everything else was Chinese for me. I finished 9th grade there. I went to a youth school in Høje Taastrup shortly after, and there I got the Danish culture under my skin from some other Danish cultural sides. There were a number of children who didn't have a stable life or had challenges, which showed me a side of Denmark that also exists, but which I have not had much to do with otherwise. A few times, my way has touched the vulnerable part of the culture or family relationships that also exist. But I have to admit that I do not have the greatest experiences or stories from there. They were all amazingly sweet children, and I had a good time with them all, with great respect and lots of kindness. A ghetto life, immigrant bubbles, or, to many foreigners and Danes, whatever separates them from each other and thus makes them you, or me, or them, or us, have never been part of my reality, my lifestyle, or thought form. I've always instinctively and intuitively been part of the whole. As I learned from my parents to both turn down and turn up who I was, it was in my backbone to adapt to the different circumstances. Sometimes I had to overrule some of what was inside myself or believed in, had learned and knew was possible. It could be knowledge that could help the situation into balance. Other times, to not tell about the wholeness in my truth so as not to overwhelm people. A compromise and respect for the truths of both parties. This was not to be right or wrong, but simply to stay in the maturation process I was in. When the differences are too big and the understandability is not fully developed to see what I see, then I've always met people where they are. This was the gift that I got from the family culture I came from, the dynamism of my mother and father. But it also turned out to be a weakness later in life. And coincidentally, I've always met people with the same ability as theirs, where they have met me, where they themselves were. I did this to avoid condemnation, and without either of us having to fight or reject the other's truth or ground. Perhaps in our relationship I have emphasized the same ability of them with which I met them. Maybe because I didn't fight for my cause, thought form, or faith, in order not to judge their thought form, faith, or cause. Dualities are great. One and the other side of the same coin meet with their differences and disagreements in agreement. My life has proved this to me in the practical form and the emotional condition many times. In any case, I know nothing about racism or rejection of me because of my double nationality. Better a positive acceptance. Better a positive acceptance in love than a rejection in criticism and condemnation. Because as soon as I judge you, then I judge myself. If I do not judge you, you will not judge me either. The children in the youth school taught me so much. I saw how everyone else could also live in the social class of others. You must understand that I come from a cozy little bubble of a family with great resources, human as well as materialistic. I had never before experienced people with such a big vulnerability. I had a great teacher of Danish named Ole. He was one of the wisest humans I've ever met. One day, trying to teach me some Danish grammar, he said to me, "Do you know where your breed originates from? Do you know that the Aryan race comes from Old Persia?" He taught me so much about what I needed. When I realized that I could balance with what was lying ahead of me in my integration and way of life as Danish Persian. So, Ole, this is a loving greeting to you from me, wherever you are right now. It is not that what he said made anything more right or wrong. It is simply because he showed me that there are many kinds of people in Denmark, just like in Persia and any other country in the world. He showed me other thought forms being less destructive and rejecting than what went on out there, and which my family felt exposed to, whether it was the neighbor who spat in front of them and called them something nasty, or... He taught me that we humans are different. Our differences acquire different knowledge and experiences, which create our understanding abilities. I only know now. I came to Copenhagen as a 15-year-old in 1991, learned a little Danish the first months I was here. Everyone cursed a lot, and it later turned out not to be part of the Danish language. I turned 16 soon after, and about 1.5 years later, I moved from home to Nyborg boarding school to take my studies. During a disco visit in downtown Copenhagen, as a 17-year-old, I got the sweetest Danish boyfriend, who was 9 years older than me. His mother's first statement about me was, "She's very cute, but she swears a lot." His mother was a very nice and sweet lady, so today I can only imagine what she thought when she met me then. Imagine if my son came up with one of the same language today. Yep, I would laugh. Our love relationship lasted for 4 years. He and his family were, for me, the epitome of Danishness. Loving, concrete, enjoyers, respectful and comprehensive. I loved what those in that family ate and drank, and the way they navigated in life. I quickly learned all the Danish basic values together with them, and a sweet friend that I got through youth school. The Catholic school was also great. I don't know why my friends from the Catholic private school didn't come along. I don't remember much from there, but I have warm feelings when I think of the school and the children who were very embracing and welcomed me lovingly. Denmark is, today, my country, which I love dearly and belong to. Denmark is my collective consciousness of which I am part. Denmark is what I call home. Persia is my old country with my old collective consciousness that I also love. Just like a young person who moves away from home, creates something new for themselves in a new place with new people and cultures. This young person will love their childhood home, but nothing beats the feeling of their own home, which they'll love even higher because they've created it for themselves. Even here, dualities take effect. Persia is the country of my ancestors, and Denmark is my country today, but it's also the country of my children's ancestors, just as Persia is the country of their passive ancestors as a second half. I am the bridge between two worlds of cultural and religious diversities, as I am today a Danish Persian and have had children with a Dane. The kind of integration I have carried out is one of the most complicated forms of integration, as I came here as almost 16 years old and thus wasn't born in Denmark. But I have learned to be double cultural. Today, I have 2 children with 2 nationalities in the physical condition, even though they are Danes only by their nationality, as they haven't experienced the other part. I am responsible for their genetic combination development, just as much as only I am the one who can help them further with an understanding of their energetic integration they are the mainstay of. This means the emotional part of their identity. We think and feel very differently in Persia versus Denmark. The Persian ancient culture, which today still prevails despite the Islamist influence, is very much developed on emotional intelligence. Danish culture is much more developed as regards operational intelligence. I have to point out here that this doesn't mean that Persians are more intelligent emotionally, or that the Danes are more intelligent operationally with their logical intellect. It might mean that the Persians have an imbalance in balancing with their emotions, and thus learn to use and develop their operational intelligence more, and that the Danes have an imbalance in balancing in their operational intelligence, in the form of thinking less logically, and having to learn to use their emotional intelligence more. This is just a teaser I'm taking up here. Being a Dane or a Persian, you mustn't take it personally. I might as well have used 2 other countries as the opposite poles to each other. I'm just trying to make an example to create understanding. What is cultural abuse? I think maybe this is some kind of outcry or an awakening us back to life chapter. I'm not trying to dramatize anything, condemn anything, or condemn us as parents, nor to turn anything into a challenge that is not real. On the contrary, I'm trying to take up a topic that not many people dare or do not want to touch. So please bear with me if you think I sound harsh or blunt. Sometimes we need a trip to the outer edge, the extreme part of the line of understanding, to be able to find the balance in the middle. Let's stick to one thing. Integration is the transformation phase of a change process. We were born in and with the concept of change. We are constantly changing in terms of our age, physics, intelligence, and consciousness in step with the nature around us. Back to my thoughts about my responsibility to my children. To create an understanding for them about their energetic integration, which they are the mainstay of, the emotional part of their identity. It will never be their father or his family, nor my family, who can help them understand that part of their identity. Only me. I am the one who created that kind of integration between 2 different worlds. I am the grail bearer behind the knowledge that I have from both cultures, nationalities, religious norms, and societal behavior patterns, not to mention the different DNA of families, both energetically and physically. Then think how much damage I can cause as a mother to the well-being of my children, understanding who they are in one of their ancestral countries, if I have not integrated myself 130% culturally into the country where they live and have their nationality. Yes, the country they were born and raised in, the place where they belong and are in the collective consciousness of, and which influences them, educates them, and gives them their identity. It is not about my negative ego, and it is not about passing on some kind of cultural heritage I grew up with or identify with. It is about giving my children the best conditions and a premise that contributes to their happiness, peace, and serenity, to form an identity that benefits them with balance and a quality-based life where they are in the present tense. Or, if I am not integrated as a Dane with a Persian background and hold them to my outdated or not useful beliefs from my ancestors and my old country, then I simply would not abide by my parental responsibilities, as I would create an unhealthy environment for my children, where they risk being separated and rejected with resistance, and they'll feel undervalued because they are from a certain nationality or are children of divorce. Here, there will be a form of psychological abuse or psychological violence in the form of their social life overruling them, because of my beliefs, faith, or a thought form that actually harms my children in some form of abuse. An example would be discrimination between a girl and a boy, and violating the girl's freedom in public. Or when parents do not acknowledge the behavior of the other parent after a divorce, and publicly expose them by tabooing the way they choose, just because they found another partner and they live their lives differently from what they did in their old marriage. Both examples would cause chaos, wounds, and can expose the person or persons to psychological violence and abuse in the form of the consequence that scoffs out socially. These forms of abuse occur when we as parents choose to separate the children from the reality which their everyday life consists of. The reality where, for instance, the Danish collective consciousness or father or mother's new family creates a quality-based environment with balance for our young people to thrive, learn, grow up, and grow in. These forms of abuse occur when we as parents take away our children's freedom, so that they cannot think or feel or sense independently where we should guide them and not control them. When we as parents educate our children under cultural or religious tools of power in the form of fear of thinking and feeling something wrong, which is presented as taboos, a sin, God's will, or just chaos and conflicts in the name of God, or in the name of children's interests. We take the previous examples as a starting point. It doesn't matter what nationality we are. Even in Denmark or Spain, you can find family dynasties based on unhealthy and ancient thought forms that take away children's freedom. The freedom to be who they are, think and feel as they were originally created for. It's just to a lesser extent than many countries from the Third World. It's one of the greatest crimes we as parents can commit, namely, to impose on our children our beliefs, which are so far from the collective consciousness the children interact with and are part of. The reason they do not feel part of it, not always because others reject them, are racists, or resist them. Perhaps this is because they lack an understanding of what integration really means. They lack the freedom to be part of the whole, without being afraid of what the family, mother, father, then thinks and says. The guilty conscience that comes with not following the guidelines set by the ruler will destroy them internally with time, and may be the cause of many mental illnesses in the future tense. Diseases in the form of, for example, anxiety, eating disorders, depression, etc. Or because children get a self-perception that they are not good enough or accepted in the wholeness like all the other children, and this can give them personality disorders and other challenges. Children should not learn to separate themselves from the pack, as right here, children learn to be children together and can thus develop as children in their interaction with each other. Children must learn to be who they are, what they are, and learn to interact in the wholeness. This is also relevant in divorces, where the children have to integrate with the new systems that one of the parents creates with another person after the divorce. Our job description as parents has changed over time. It's no longer about our needs and that the children must be dependent on our knowledge and experiences, even though they are 30 years old. The digital age is here. It's about our children being able to search knowledge just by Googling and having access to a vast world of knowledge without having to fulfill our need to be parents in line with the old role descriptions. But they need us to guide them with our knowledge in the form of our experiences and give them the freedom to find their own way through life in the digital age and through the wild world of divorce formats and family forms, such as the various gender identities constantly appearing. And yes, it takes a lot of boundaries, etc. The point is not only the upbringing here, but the approach and thought forms we need to be conscious of. What are we parents upgraded to, and what are we downgraded to? What should we phase out? What is sustained to take forward? What do our children need? We harm our children if we hold on to the children and do not give them the freedom to think and feel for themselves. We harm the children if we hold on to the children in a condition called, "This is how it used to be." We harm the children if we do not let them integrate into the new system with new bonus parents and siblings because we meet our anxiety and are unable to keep up with the changes that come with it. We harm the children if we do not allow the children to integrate culturally. Children who lose their freedom of sensing and feeling themselves, or daring to act on their impulses, instincts, and intuition, are children who lose their independence, and thus their original personality. Those children become slaves to their parents' old beliefs, which actually benefit no one or anything anymore. Neither the one of the parents with resistance, nor the one holding the child back. They'll be stuck in the fear of losing everything, including themselves, as they cannot recognize themselves or the other party in the new pattern of behavior that arises from the shift and the changes. These children must choose sides, and in a cultural integration, this is the choice between parents or the new society, or in a new family integration after a divorce, where the choice is between mom or dad. It's therefore unreasonable for our children to have to bear so much responsibility and to lose their childhood. These children, as adults, can spend a lifetime trying to figure out who they are, as they will have to choose something of themselves on or off in the forced choices they encounter on their way. They are children who lack their original identity, independent of their parents. This challenge may also occur to children who come from a hierarchical or patriarchal or matriarchal family, where one is the head of the family and decides, and where everyone else follows along. Anxiety is often the dominant factor here too. fear of change, of not being recognized or good enough to be accepted by the norm that the head exercises, often from an outdated thought form, since it never voluntarily changes. Those children are still children who did not have the freedom to fail, to choose on and off, to learn and create their own identity and gain experience which is theirs. Those children lack the tools to free themselves from their family's old beliefs, because there is a ruler behind them who manages and controls them with anxiety, a guilty conscience and victimhood, or simply by means of some kind of religious belief, which is that they will end up in hell. The ruler manipulates and brainwashes them into rejecting the new. The ruler forces the children to preserve, for example, the dying religious family culture or socio-cultural beliefs and the norm with which the person was brought up with in his home country, and is thus stuck in. The rulers justify their actions, calling it taking responsibility and wishing the children the best. The ruler withholds the children from being part of a new culture or collective consciousness or family, as they are full of anxiety. Some parents do this even if their children are 30 or 40 years old. And yes, it happens in all countries of the world, all nationalities and faiths, if the parents have not developed enough with their forms of intelligence. Imagine if they let go. Who are they then? What about their faith? What about the family structure they knew and once created? Often, the faith presented to them as children is their belief today, the alpha faith, the faith that is the reason for their survival. For example, if it is a religious faith, it will present punishment for all eternity if they don't abide by it. If the belief is a cultural belief, it will present a right or wrong concept. It will punish people when they don't follow what they think is right. For example, by trying to exclude the other party from social life, by tabooing and judging the other one to be wrong or to do something completely wrong. In relation to extreme religious belief, we must understand one thing. Precisely if they choose not to remain in the faith in which they were born, they can die. Literally, a Muslim cannot change religion in a Muslim country. In Persia, a Muslim woman who is not a believer and cheats on her husband will be stoned to death. At least, that is how it was when I lived there. It is their faith with which they are indoctrinated, and which is not self-chosen. They themselves have not had the same freedom their children have or are given. They feel as if they are losing their children to a kind of freedom they themselves have not had. Freedom is presented as taboo, sin, and as being dangerous for them in their childhood. They only have their children left. They've lost their country, family, spouses, and so they hold on to the last known and try to maintain the old collective consciousness in all that is new. Chaos and conflict appear. Minus and minus give separation, rejection, resistance, conflicts, and maximum chaos in this case. For me, when a faith is not voluntary and is chosen in adulthood, then it is brainwashed and manipulated into people. I know many loving, intelligent, and balanced people of faith who have chosen their own faith and never judge others, nor do they believe that their faith is the alpha faith above all others. Then I can join in with respect for who they are, even if I do not believe in their faith. To me, a faith is a belief, and neither of us can allow ourselves to judge the other's faith to be wrong or right. It's about a faith not having a negative output when practiced. There should be legislation around faith that creates, contributes, or is partially responsible for dissatisfaction in the form of psychological violence or abuse. Then all forms of cultural integration would slide down more easily, as the new units would face a choice and the freedom to choose and follow the law, or get away and find a place they are better suited to. Then the Parental Responsibility Act would have a different meaning, interpretation, and perspective. Parents will have to change themselves and their beliefs if their beliefs contribute to the children being manipulated and brainwashed, or if those children lose their freedom to think, feel, and choose, unlike all other children in the society they are in and are part of. Right now, child psychologists as experts assume what the children express and whether they are thriving and want to be there, even though they are manipulated. And no, this is not a thesis, but a lesson and an experience that I have seen and heard several times. Frankly, it shouldn't be the children's responsibility to express it themselves, as they may be manipulated and brainwashed by one of the parents in or after a divorce, or by both parents in a cultural integration in a country. They themselves will also become an integral part of something new and thrive well or better as they choose to stay in that system or move back, if this has a clarifying consequence for the kind of behavior patterns that are defined as dissatisfaction and abuse, and which ultimately can be defined as disregard of human rights anyway, just by the parents. Danish politicians, who often lack the law to intervene and help children suffering from cultural and religious abuse, often forget that in Denmark we have a parental responsibility law that may be further developed to prevent this kind of abuse. This can help everyone to have a better integration process. This also applies to Danish families in the new form of integration, which comes in the family intertwinings they face after a divorce, and also for the new gender identity definition, or all the new definitions of family forms that have been added in recent years. We have to start somewhere, so let's start with our next generation, our children. It's about putting things into perspective and defining abuse and freedom. Back to my children and my responsibility as a mother. Responsibility for children with both double culture and nationality. In this way, we might as well include children of divorce as the cultural integration. My children, the knowledge the two young people need about their physical and energetic genetic origins, and their identity I am carrying. That's another reason why I am writing this book. When they read it one day, they get an insight into where they also come from, and who they were raised by, and by this, what they are capable of doing in the form of anything is possible. I think many of us overrule or are not aware of our responsibility and role when we make big integrations. Not only the great integrations which are based on two cultures, but also on what we create for people, children in the kind of integration where they carry two genes from two different worlds, physical or mental, energetic DNA, such as my children. Here, it applies to the individuals created in this format, with parents of two nationalities. In other words, not only double cultural like me, but those who have an extra edge on it, like the double energetic and physical genetic cultural environment, which consists of a new original DNA. They will need help finding their boxes to which they belong. Boxes such as a social collective consciousness and norm that suits them. After all, they are also the divergent types who may choose to be frontrunners for a newer way of looking at our world, which is always changing. Those who will certainly have a role in the integration ability of the future collective consciousness. And yes, then think how many of us are divorced today, and how many of us are another nationality or culture. It was not like this when I was a child in the 70s. So, yes, we need new thought forms and new beliefs to be capable of helping our children move forward, so they can build another cultural collective consciousness based on diversities. We have started this journey, and it is our social responsibility to set aside our old beliefs and faith, to be able to help future generations without pressuring them, without taking their responsibility from them, but by teaching them to think and feel and thus balance under responsibility in the age of diversities. So, yes, we as parents of children with double nationalities have a special role in helping our children further in life. One day, they will return and ask about the other side of themselves, if they choose to, as I did. I preferred to choose a position to spare my children an identity crisis as infants or in their teens. They should be allowed to be children on an equal footing with other children. I have my conviction that anything else would create chaos within them and around their social lives. Again, as I always say, one identity at a time. Each of our personas gives us different experiences and learnings. Better to have wonderful experiences of who we are, which become experiences we can use sustained when we are ready, than to force our children through a world of beliefs. A world based on our social heritage, family cultural heritage, etc., which is not appropriate for the well-being of children in this new collective consciousness of which we have chosen to be part. As my old father said when I was a little girl, "My darling, put on a bikini if you are in a country where everyone else is wearing a bikini. Put on a scarf if you are in a country where everyone else is wearing a headscarf. And if they're all naked in the country you're in, take off all your clothes." Integrations do not fail because we are different from each other, but because we hold on to a belief that it is not useful in the new collective consciousness we must integrate ourselves into. Integration is an active choice and an acceptance of change. Integration is to let go of all old convictions that are inappropriate for a balanced integration, and to be willing to understand that everything is a choice. Everything is okay to choose. Everything is nothing. Choosing nothing is everything. Everything starts and ends from nothing. The core of every human being is everything and nothing. It depends on the choice we make if we transfer nothing to everything. To choose everything, we must start from nothing. Something indefinable inside me is touched, and tears always roll down my cheeks when I think of Persia, or when we celebrate the Persian New Year, or when I hear Persian music. It's completely out of my control. The tears just roll out of my control. It's not a wound, but a need for something I might have to let go of in order to be happy and to complete my integration here in the present tense. Maybe one day I shall find out what it is as I get older. But I think the fact is that the part of me is not so recognized by the social norms of the religious foolhardy power play in Persia. It tears at a part of me. Because I know what else Persia is. Something different from what everyone thinks they know through the media. The greatness that the country presents with a cultural heritage in the form of art, poems, with a world of emotions, where colors and joy shine through, the love and warmth people have in them and to each other. The cultural heritage that a Persian presents is something that I am proud to be part of. Despite the fact that I am Danish-Persian, that Denmark is my country, and that I love my country, I would never be able to go back to Persia and feel part of the whole anymore, which I can feel today, because then a part of me would be left with a great, indescribable, and incomprehensible need when a scent, music, or image evokes memories. And the fact is that the probability that I could return to Persia for the time being after the publication of this book is equal to 0, since I write and express myself as I do. It hurts and tears my heart, but a lot can happen in the future, and everything can change with the snap of a finger. Maybe one day I shall travel to Persia to inspire them with Danish culture, our beautiful gender role identity development, and how we live in Denmark. You never know. In any case, both men and women have taken up their fight in Persia, where Persian women have shown themselves from a different side than before here in 2022, 2023. So much can happen. I have taken with me all the sustained cultural parts that I value and find valuable. I have integrated them with the sustained cultural parts from Denmark, transformed them into a new state of consciousness for me where I am in life. So, multicultural people must remember that they are not a sustained generation, and they must likewise remember their fellow human beings they interact with in the collective consciousness, and of which they are a part. So they should certainly not move to a country with such different collective consciousness from their original one. The theory here proves that it is not possible to carry out an integration of and with the new units. They'll have to choose a camp, a standpoint, to sort, to choose off and choose on, to transform and create a combined identity that they can stand firm in. The collective consciousness must remember that it also embraces a process of change by embracing new units which are so different from their own internal patterns of behavior, cultural dynamics, and thus religious beliefs. It must have possible solutions and a consequential clarification and a clarified boundary statement both for itself and the new units to come. It is like starting a new relationship or a relationship with a teenager who is trying to find their place and identity in their liberation process in relation to the outside world or the new relationship. They'll test the limits to find out where my and your limit is. Understanding boundary differences is one of the most important elements of integration, as there must be a change in the boundaries for balanced integration. Who are you and who am I? If you are so different from me, then am I better? I know best? I am more developed? Or are you? Or can we benefit each other? That is the best way I can describe this kind of cultural integration. Once again, using both our combined intelligences and our combined consciousnesses becomes an essential thing in order to achieve a combined identity, just like a merger between two companies or restructuring of a company. The formula of energy and consciousness can also be used for integration. Clarification is a cause. It creates boundaries which have an effect. The consequence is clarification. It changes conditions or circumstances. They become decisions where we can choose the experiences. This is a transformation that leads to change. This results in a new combined identity, renewed energy, a combined intelligence, combined consciousness with wisdom. This becomes a new reset, the new cultural identity, which becomes a cause of its own. We humans are like a house. We are built differently, comprehend different capacities and different materials, are built by different architects, and placed in different places. Whether the house is located by the water or in a big city, there are different conditions that our environment around us demands and from us. Our house is a projection of us, our mirror image. Without our house we cannot survive, since For example, the cold will kill us. Our houses are thus a kind of shroud around us, which fits us and is built like us according to our needs. A house from South Africa wouldn't survive in Greenland for very long. At least, it wouldn't be a sustained solution. That is how simple and easy it is to understand the concept of integration. We cannot move our houses with us to the corners of the world we move to. We need a new house to survive with balance and quality, with optimal well-being. A house is a house, but there are many houses and many conditions with many purposes, depending on the conditions around them where they are located. Our house is where we feel protected, find peace, have privacy, can be ourselves without a filter, where our loved ones are, and where we retreat to when we are not part of the collective consciousness. Thus, we need to change the condition of our house when we move it to other environments, and optimize it for the conditions of the new environment, for our and our loved ones' happy and appropriate well-being. We must do this to restore balance and quality after a move or change, and the changes this cause will bring as an effect.